It's been years since I last heard from Tyler. But when the phone rang tonight, I knew the silence was finally breaking, and it wasn't going to be good. The silence between us had stretched longer than I could bear, but it wasn't until tonight that I realized how much I'd come to expect it. It's as though, over time, the absence of his voice became a comfortable hum in my life. Maybe it was because I knew, deep down, that I hadn't been the father he needed. I hadn't been perfect, no one is, but I gave everything I had. And when I say everything, I mean it every minute, every decision, every ounce of energy I could muster. That's what a father does, doesn't he? The apartment smelled faintly of pine, a leftover hint of Christmas from last year. I hadn't had the energy to take the tree down, so it still stood in the corner, its fake needles shedding tiny shards like memories lost in the passage of time. The old kitchen table was cluttered with half-read newspapers and empty mugs, evidence of the many solitary dinners I'd had over the past year. Evelyn would have hated it, the clutter, the loneliness. I could almost hear her voice in my head telling me to clean up, telling me that family was the most important thing. But family. Family had always been fragile. Tyler had always been different from the other kids. When he was young, he had so much fire in him, always asking questions, always searching for more. He never saw limits. I'd admired that about him, especially when life was hard. But somewhere along the way, that fire became a burning desire for more than I could give him. I had worked countless hours, taken on every job, sacrificed everything to make sure Tyler didn't feel what I'd felt growing up. We didn't have a lot, but I made sure he never went without. And yet, somewhere, we lost each other. It all started with that loan request, the one he threw at me so casually, like it was my obligation to help him fund yet another one of his wild investments. "It's just a small loan, Dad," he'd said, his voice wrapped in a sense of entitlement I hadn't heard in years. "Just a bit of a push, and I'll make it all back, you'll see." I refused. I told him I didn't have the money to throw away on his whims. That was the last time I heard from him. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard it shook the entire house. And just like that, the silence settled in. He moved out. He moved on, and I stayed behind, left with the ghosts of better days and the painful weight of a decision that had torn my family apart. And yet, as I stood there in my kitchen, feeling every ache in my back and hands, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Was I too harsh? Had I failed him? Evelyn would have known what to say. She always did. I picked up the phone, my fingers trembling just slightly as I wiped them on the dish towel. The number on the screen made my heart stop. Tyler. For a moment I just stood there, staring at the screen. He hadn't called in a year of silence, of hurt, of regrets. I thought about letting it ring out, just ignoring it like I had every other time. But some nagging feeling I couldn't shake made me answer. "Hello?" My voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to, but it did. "Dad?" His voice was shaky, uncertain, a stark contrast to the confident tone he'd always had in the past. It's me." I leaned against the counter, my mind racing. I hadn't expected him to call, not like this. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you," I said quietly. I didn't mean for it to sound like an accusation, but it did. The words felt heavy as they left my mouth. "I know," he said. "I know. It's been too long." I closed my eyes for a second, swallowing down the emotions that had built up over the year. I wanted to say something meaningful, something that would let him know I was here, that I cared, that I hadn't given up on him. But the words caught in my throat. All I had was silence, a silence that felt more like an accusation than a comfort. "How are you, son?" I finally asked. It sounded weak, like I was trying to convince myself that everything would be okay. I'm good, really good. Emma and we've been talking, and we realized how much we miss having you around, how much we miss family. Family. The word hung in the air between us like a weight. It wasn't the first time I had heard it from him, but this time it felt different. His voice had a softness to it that I hadn't heard before, a vulnerability I hadn't expected. I miss it too, I said. The words surprised me as much as they might have surprised him. I wasn't sure if it was true or if it was just something I wanted to believe, but it felt like the right thing to say. Dad, would you consider coming for dinner tonight? Emma's making that pot roast you always loved. We could talk, really talk, like we used to. I stood there, the weight of the phone in my hand growing heavier with each passing second. Part of me wanted to say no, to refuse, to protect myself from the pain I knew would come. But there was another part of me, a part that missed him, that missed the days when things were simpler, when we could sit down as a family and share a meal without the tension hanging in the air. Yeah, I said. The word came out before I could stop it. I'll be there. Tyler's voice softened, filled with gratitude. Thanks, Dad. We've wasted enough time. I'll text you the address. 7:30, don't be late. I hung up, staring at the phone for a long moment. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. Was this really happening? Was I really about to walk back into the mess I'd tried so hard to leave behind? I thought about Margaret, about how she always said, families find their way back to each other, given time. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was the time. I grabbed my jacket, the one I hadn't worn in months, and walked upstairs. The hallway was quiet, the walls lined with memories of better times, of moments I'd hoped would never fade. I pulled the suit from the back of the closet. The navy one Margaret had insisted I buy for Tyler's graduation. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, Chanel No. 5. I ran my fingers along the fabric, remembering the last time I wore it, the pride I'd felt walking into that auditorium, knowing that Tyler was about to make something of himself. I had always hoped he would, that he'd grow into someone who understood the value of hard work, who understood what it meant to sacrifice for the people you love. The shower ran hot, steam filling the bathroom. I couldn't remember the last time I'd really looked at myself in the mirror. The lines around my eyes had deepened, silver now streaking through my hair. I wondered if Tyler would notice how much I'd changed, how much time had passed since we'd last seen each other. When I was dressed, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the suit. It fit, though a bit more loosely than it had when I first bought it. I grabbed the bottle of whiskey I had picked out a peace offering, something to bridge the gap between past hurts and future hopes. The Uber arrived right on time, and as I slid into the back seat, I realized that everything had changed. Nothing would ever be the same. But maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward something better. Towards healing, towards reclaiming what was lost. As the car pulled away, I looked out the window at the familiar streets of Brooklyn, watching them blur into the distance. The lights from the street lamps cast long shadows, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this dinner, this reunion, would be the beginning of something new. But as the car drove further into Montclair, with its polished mansions and perfectly manicured lawns, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. The destination was closer now, and so was the truth. When I stepped out of the Uber and saw the grand house looming in front of me, I realized just how much I didn't know about the life my son had built. The sleek black car came to a halt before an enormous stone mansion with towering columns that seemed to stare down at me as if judging my every step. The driveway, perfectly paved, stretched out like a red carpet to a front door that could have belonged to a movie set. I stood there, my breath catching in my throat, feeling the weight of every decision I'd made up until this point. In that moment, I realized just how out of place I was. My shoes, though polished, were worn at the heel from years of use. The suit I wore, the one I'd bought for Tyler's graduation years ago, now felt foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. I had always known Tyler was ambitious, but this wasn't just ambition. This was a life I could never have imagined. "Welcome to Montlair," the driver said, his voice too cheerful, almost as if he could feel the distance between me and the life I was about to walk into. The town itself was a dream, its perfectly manicured lawns, sprawling mansions, and immaculately paved streets giving off an air of quiet wealth and status. It was the kind of place where you didn't ask questions, where everyone seemed to know their place. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer in the world I once shared with my son. As I stood there, trying to steady my nerves, I wondered how Tyler had come to this place, how he had crossed from our modest Brooklyn home to this mansion. I wasn't sure what to expect from him tonight. A part of me still felt that old, raw hurt, the sting of his last words, when he stormed out a year ago. But another part of me wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation. Maybe this would be a night of healing, of bridging the gap that had formed between us. After all, he was my son, and Emma, his wife, she had been part of our family, part of the joy I thought we still had left. Or so I had convinced myself. The door to the mansion opened before I could even ring the bell. A woman stood there, middle-aged with graying hair and kind yet nervous eyes. She wore a crisp black dress, the kind a professional housekeeper might wear, and though she smiled at me, I could see a flicker of concern behind her eyes, quickly masked by politeness. "Mr. Harris," she greeted me warmly, stepping aside to let me in. "Mr. Tyler and Miss Vanessa are expecting you. They're so excited you could make it." I followed her through the vast foyer, my footsteps echoing against the marble floors. The house was an architectural marvel, filled with high ceilings, expensive paintings, and crystal chandeliers that caught the light in such a way that it almost seemed unreal. Every room I passed was decorated with expensive furniture and perfect decor. The walls themselves seemed to speak of a life of luxury, of the success that I had not known. A faint pang of regret mixed with disbelief at what Tyler had achieved. In the living room, Tyler was waiting for me. He stood tall, his smile wide, too bright, too practiced. When he stepped toward me, his movements were almost too smooth, as if he had rehearsed this moment 100 times. He was dressed impeccably in a suit that screamed wealth, something I could never afford, no matter how hard I worked. "Dad," he said, his voice surprisingly soft as he embraced me. The hug was brief but tight, his hands clapping my back in a way that felt overly familiar. "You look great," he added, pulling away, his eyes scanning me like he was analyzing something. I couldn't help but feel a sharp, unspoken question in the air. Had he really missed me? Or was this just part of the act he'd put on for the evening? "Thanks, son," I replied, trying to sound casual, though inside I was anything but. "This place is impressive." "Yeah, it's nothing," he said quickly, brushing it off. "Emma's been working on the interior for months. Come in. I'll take your coat." He waved toward the chair where the housekeeper, Maria, had already placed the coat stand. "Let's get you settled. Dinner's almost ready." I handed him my jacket, feeling a rush of unfamiliar vulnerability. This was not the son I remembered. The son who had once been so eager to please, so full of youthful energy and dreams of the future. This man standing before me was someone different, someone who had built a life I barely recognized, but I was still his father. I wanted to understand him again, to be part of his world, even if it seemed like a world where I didn't quite belong. Emma appeared just then, stepping from the adjacent room with a glass of wine in her hand. She was dressed in a silky red gown that shimmered under the lights, her smile warm and inviting. As she walked toward me, her every movement seemed carefully choreographed, like she had studied the art of being the perfect hostess. "Jonathan, it's so good to see you again." She kissed me on the cheek, the scent of her perfume enveloping me. "Tyler's been talking about this night for weeks. We've missed you." I forced a smile, feeling the warmth of her embrace, though it didn't quite reach my heart. "I've missed you both, too," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was entirely true. I had missed the idea of family, but I hadn't missed the distance that had grown between us. "Come, let's sit. Dinner is served." Emma guided me to the dining room, her hand on my arm a little too firm, too deliberate. There was a calculated elegance to the way she handled everything, almost as if she were orchestrating the evening like a performance. The dining room was magnificent, the table set with gleaming silverware and fine china that looked too delicate for a family like ours. The contrast between the opulence of the room and the years of hard work I had poured into my businesses was not lost on me. This was the life Tyler had chosen, and it seemed to be everything I had hoped for him, yet so much more than I ever expected. As I took my seat at the head of the table, Tyler smiled at me, his eyes scanning my face, waiting for my approval. His gaze was almost pleading in its intensity, as if he were waiting for me to tell him he had done well, that I was proud of him. "You must be proud, Dad," Tyler said as he poured me a glass of wine, his voice tinged with a slight edge of anxiety. "Emma's been telling me how much you liked pot roast, so we made sure to get it just right. It's just like how Mom used to make it, right?" The mention of Margaret stung. It always did. The pain of losing her had never truly gone away. But I nodded, swallowing down the lump in my throat. "Yeah, it smells wonderful," I said, trying to push past the emotions that crept up with every passing second. The pot roast looked exactly like Margaret's. It was so familiar, so comforting. But it also reminded me of everything we had lost, everything I had sacrificed, and how little Tyler seemed to appreciate it. The dinner began, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The questions Tyler asked, the way Vanessa seemed to be watching me too closely, made me uneasy. Why had they invited me? What did they really want from me? And then, as I reached for the breadbasket, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The number was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. "Get up and go now. Don't say anything to your son." My blood turned cold. I froze, my fingers gripping the edge of the table. Was this some kind of joke? A prank? The room felt suddenly smaller, the opulence around me suffocating. I looked up at Tyler, who smiled at me with a kindness that felt forced. And for the first time that night, I wondered if the world he had built for himself was a house of cards, fragile and teetering on the edge of collapse. And that's when I made the call. I thought I was just having dinner with my son and his wife. But as I read the text, the room began to spin. Everything about this evening was a lie. The words on my phone glared at me, written in sharp capital letters. "Get up and go now. Don't say anything to your son." The message didn't make any sense. And yet, as I held the phone in my hand, it felt like the weight of 1,000 truths pressing down on me. The laughter from the dining room seemed distant now, as if the world around me had shifted into a different reality. Tyler, his wife Vanessa, the mansion, all of it felt like a performance, a show that I had been invited to watch but not to participate in. I stared at the text, my mind racing, trying to process what it meant. I glanced up and Tyler was still talking, telling me about some new real estate deal, about how successful he'd become. His words were like background noise, his smile wide but lacking something genuine. Vanessa, seated next to me, kept glancing at me, her eyes too bright, too eager to please. I knew something was wrong. There was a sense of discomfort creeping under my skin, an unsettling feeling I couldn't shake. The lavishness of the house, the extravagant dinner, the forced smiles, they all felt hollow. This wasn't the reunion I had hoped for. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in my head. Was it possible that Tyler was still the same boy who had once looked up to me? The boy who had called me for advice? Was it possible that this whole dinner, this whole evening was just a ruse? The wine in my glass shimmered in the light as I swirled it, trying to buy time to figure out my next move. As I brought it to my lips, I noticed how Tyler and Vanessa's eyes never left me. The attention felt too intense, too calculated. I felt like a specimen under a magnifying glass, and the more I tried to push the thought away, the more I couldn't escape it. I set the glass down, the wine now tasting like something foreign, something tainted. I wasn't sure why, but something about it felt off. Maybe it was the way Vanessa refilled it so quickly, the way Tyler poured his own glass just a little too carefully. But it didn't matter. I wasn't going to drink anymore. The unease was building inside me, and I needed to figure out what was really going on. I excused myself, telling them I needed a moment. They both smiled, too quickly, too eagerly. I felt their eyes on me as I made my way down the hall, toward what I assumed was the bathroom. But as I walked, something in my gut told me to keep going, to keep moving. I passed the powder room and kept walking, drawn toward the kitchen. There, I found Maria, the housekeeper, washing the fine china with methodical precision. Her back was turned to me, but I could feel her tension. She didn't acknowledge my presence, even though she had to have heard my footsteps. She just continued her work, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she wiped each plate clean. I moved quietly toward the back door. The cold night air beckoned me, a moment of escape from the tense atmosphere inside. I needed to think, to get away from all the pretense, from the carefully constructed lies I had been fed since I arrived. As I reached the door, I could feel Maria's eyes on me, but she said nothing. Her hesitation spoke volumes. She knew something. She had to. The strange feeling I'd had all night, the warning I couldn't shake, it wasn't just in my head. It was real. Maria's silence was the only confirmation I needed. She knew exactly what was going on. I stepped outside into the cold, the chill of the night air hitting me like a slap in the face. The stars above were bright, distant, and the quiet of the garden made everything feel surreal. I stood there for a moment, trying to clear my head, to process everything. The elegant facade of the mansion felt like a lie now, a lie that was about to unravel. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed the number from the mysterious text. It rang twice before a voice answered. The voice was calm, controlled, like someone who had done this 1,000 times. "I hoped you would call," the voice said, a hint of satisfaction in the tone. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice tight with confusion. "I can't reveal myself," the voice said, "but you need to understand, you are in immediate danger. Your son and his wife. They've been planning to take everything from you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced as I tried to process what was being said. Tyler? Vanessa? They were planning to take everything from me? What did that even mean? "They've been building a case, preparing legal documents, waiting for the moment when you're too weak to resist," the voice continued. They've been tampering with your food and drink. You've already started to feel it, haven't you? The dizziness, the confusion. It's called zetrolum. It multiplies the effects of alcohol. You've been drugged." I stood there, frozen, the phone pressed to my ear. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own son, my flesh and blood, was planning this? Was this what he had become? I could hear my heartbeat in my ears as the voice continued, outlining the plan. They had intended to make me sign everything away, my restaurants, my assets, before I realized what was happening. The entire dinner had been orchestrated to get me to lower my guard, to trick me into doing something I would regret. "Listen to me," the voice said. "You need to leave now. Don't go back to the house. Don't trust them. They'll try to cover their tracks. You need to act quickly." I didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there in the dark, my mind spinning. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Tyler, my son, was trying to steal from me, was trying to ruin me for his own gain. But the voice was right. I had to act. I had to protect myself. I couldn't let them get away with this. I hung up, my hands shaking as I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The weight of what I had just learned was almost too much to bear. Tyler, my son. He wasn't the man I thought he was. He wasn't the boy I raised. I walked back toward the house, my mind made up. I would leave. I would get out before it was too late. But as I approached the front door, my phone buzzed again. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. But this time, I didn't answer. Instead, I turned and walked back toward the gate, the weight of betrayal heavy on my shoulders. There was no going back now. And that's when I knew exactly what I had to do next. The fresh air hit me like a shock. But the real shock came when I realized I was leaving my son behind not for the first time, but for the last. I had never thought I'd be in a situation like this, never thought that I'd be standing at the edge of a life I had built with my own hands, my blood, my sweat, and watch it all crumble. But the weight of what I had just learned felt like the weight of years, crushing every ounce of hope and trust I had left in my son. I could hardly breathe as I stepped away from that mansion, my heart racing faster than my feet. Tyler's mansion, with its perfect lawn and pristine front door, now felt like a prison to me. Every inch of the driveway that led up to that grand house felt like a mile I needed to put between myself and the lies that had been spun. The betrayal was still fresh in my chest, the taste of it sour on my tongue. My own son, my flesh and blood. He was trying to take everything from me. The phone call, the voice in the dark, the warning, it all made sense now. The too perfect dinner, the overly attentive pouring of wine, the forced smiles. I wasn't part of a reunion. I was part of a plan to strip me of everything I had worked for. The anger surged through me, hot and sharp. But so did something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. I looked back at the house one last time, but then turned away, forcing my feet to move forward. I had to leave, and I had to do it now. There was no room for hesitation. If I went back in, if I sat down at that table again, I might just fall into their trap. And I couldn't do that. Not after everything I had sacrificed. Not after everything my wife, Evelyn, had sacrificed. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I searched for the number to the rideshare app. My fingers fumbled, and I cursed under my breath, feeling the pressure of time ticking away. But finally I found it. I punched in the address for the nearest corner, 1 block away from the mansion, 1 block of freedom. The seconds felt like hours as I stood by the gate, watching the world move slowly around me, my mind spinning in every direction. What was I going to do? How would I face this betrayal? Would Tyler come looking for me? Would Vanessa try to talk me into returning? But there was no going back. There was no return to that version of my son I had once believed in. The Uber arrived a few minutes later, a black sedan pulling up to the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, greeted me with a nod as I climbed in. The warmth of the car was a stark contrast to the cool night air, but I didn't feel any comfort in it. Instead, I felt like I was running away from something I could no longer face. The car began to pull away from Montlair, the mansion fading into the distance. The streets outside seemed quiet, almost too quiet, like the calm before a storm. As the car passed through the perfect suburban streets, the reality of the situation began to settle in. Tyler had done this. Tyler had orchestrated all of this. The lies, the manipulation, the drugged whiskey, all of it. And for what? For money? For control? For power? What had happened to the boy I raised? My thoughts were interrupted by the buzzing of my phone. I glanced down, and it was another message from Tyler. "Dad, where are you? I've been trying to reach you. Emma's really worried." I stared at the text, anger rising in my chest again. Worried? How could he be worried? He had just tried to steal everything from me. They weren't worried. They were desperate. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. What more could I say? He had crossed the line, and there was no going back for either of us. As the car turned onto the highway, I looked out the window at the blurred lights of the town. Montlair had never looked so cold, so foreign. I had once believed that if I worked hard enough, if I sacrificed enough, I could give Tyler the life he deserved. But what had I really given him? A mansion? A life of luxury built on lies? Or had I given him the ability to see that family was just another thing to exploit? The driver glanced at me through the rear-view mirror. "You okay back there?" he asked gently, sensing something was off. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was lying to him or myself. "Just a lot on my mind," I said. The car picked up speed, and as we merged onto the freeway, I let myself drift into the thoughts that had been simmering inside me for hours. There was still so much I didn't know. What was this all really about? Was it just the gambling debts that had pushed Tyler to this point? Or was there something deeper, something darker, that had led him to this betrayal? But it didn't matter. I couldn't change what had already been done. What mattered now was that I had to protect myself. I had to protect everything that mattered to me. And that's when it hit me. I had to go back. I looked at the driver in the mirror. "Turn around," I said, my voice steady now. "Take me back to Montlair." The driver raised an eyebrow. "You sure, sir? We're halfway to Brooklyn. You want me to turn around?" I met his gaze in the mirror. "Yeah, take me back." The car began to turn, and as it did, something inside me shifted. I wasn't running away anymore. I was going back to confront the people who thought they could take everything from me. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not this time. The car sped back toward Montlair, and I knew the decision I had just made was the right one. I had to face this. I had to face Tyler, Vanessa, and the lies they had built. As we neared the exit from Montlair, I felt a quiet determination settle in my chest. I was going to confront them. I was going to take back what was mine. The Uber slowed as it approached the exit. I could see the familiar streetlights of Montlair up ahead, their glow now casting shadows of what was to come. But when I turned to look out the window, I saw something I hadn't expected. Blue and red lights flashed in the distance. The police were already there, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming next. By the time I reached Brooklyn, everything I thought I knew about family had changed, but it wasn't over yet. I didn't know how long the drive had taken, but it felt like an eternity. The weight of everything that had happened in just a few short hours pressed down on me with an intensity I hadn't expected. Tyler, Vanessa, the mansion, the lies, it all felt like a bad dream I was desperate to wake from. But when I looked out the window, the dark streets of Brooklyn greeted me, and I realized I wasn't dreaming. This was my reality now. My son had betrayed me, and the world I thought I knew had shattered. The Uber driver pulled up to my street, but I didn't get out immediately. I sat there in the back seat, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Who was I now? What had become of the man who had spent his whole life sacrificing for his family? The father who had poured everything into his son, only to have it all turned against him in the end? I thought about Evelyn. She would have known what to do. She always did. She'd have seen this coming, I thought. She always warned me about letting people take advantage of my kindness, about being too soft. She would have told me to be strong, to stand up for myself. And yet, even with her wisdom, I had let it happen. I had let Tyler use me, let him manipulate me into thinking he was still the son I raised. I grabbed my phone, hesitating before dialing the number I had promised myself I wouldn't call. The authorities. I had to take control of this, or it would spiral out of my hands. Tyler and Vanessa weren't going to stop. I had seen enough of their desperation, their manipulative behavior. If I didn't act now, they would finish what they started. I dialed the number for the local precinct, my fingers trembling slightly. It rang twice before someone picked up. Montclair Police Department, how can I help you? I need to report a crime, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. My son and his wife have been attempting to defraud me. They've been drugging me to get me to sign legal documents transferring ownership of my businesses and assets. There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of typing. Sir, are you in immediate danger? The officer asked. I hesitated. Not right now, but they've been planning this for weeks. I have the documents, the evidence. They're at my house, and they've already made arrangements to take everything. We'll send a unit to your location, the officer said. Please stay where you are. Do not return to the house until we arrive. Do you have any other details? I quickly outlined the events, my voice clear and firm. I told them about the tampered whiskey, the text messages, and the suspicions I had regarding Tyler's financial dealings. I wasn't sure what the police could do, but at least I would have someone on my side. The realization that I wasn't alone in this battle was a small comfort. Officers will be on their way. Stay safe, sir. I hung up the phone, taking a deep breath. This was it. I had taken the first step in reclaiming control over my life. Now, it was time to confront the people who had tried to tear it all apart. I stepped out of the Uber and walked slowly up to my front door. The familiar sound of the lock clicking echoed in the quiet night. But something about the silence felt different now. It wasn't the peaceful quiet I had known. It felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. I pushed open the door, stepping into the hallway. It felt the same, yet it was entirely different. The house that had once been a home now felt like a battlefield. Every room seemed to whisper memories of better times, of moments I had taken for granted. Margaret's perfume lingered in the air, a constant reminder of the woman who had always known how to make everything feel right. But now it felt empty. The walls, the furniture, the photos, they all seemed like relics of a life that no longer existed. My son had taken that life, had manipulated it, twisted it for his own gain. And I had let him. I walked into the kitchen, my heart heavy. I reached for the glass of water on the counter, but before I could drink, I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. My stomach tightened as I turned toward the window, my eyes catching the flashing lights of the police cars. The cavalry had arrived. I didn't know what to expect when they knocked on the door. I didn't know how I would face Tyler, How I would look him in the eye after everything that had happened. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done being the victim. This was my moment to reclaim my dignity, my life, and everything I had worked for. The knock came loud and firm. I opened the door to find 2 officers standing on the porch. One was a tall man with a stern face, the other shorter, but no less authoritative. Both had the look of men who had seen it all. "Mr. Harris?" the taller officer asked. I nodded. "We've been briefed on the situation. We'll need to speak with your son and daughter-in-law." I led them inside, the officers scanning the room as they entered. I could feel the tension rising in my chest. This was it. This was the moment when everything would change. The sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs, and I knew it was Tyler. I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out how to talk his way out of this. But it was too late for excuses. He had crossed a line, and now he would have to face the consequences. The officers moved swiftly, their presence filling the room with a sense of authority. They didn't waste time. They walked toward the stairs, where Tyler stood frozen, his face paling as he realized what was happening. "Richard Harris," the officer called out. Tyler didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, his eyes wide with fear. The officer stepped forward. "You're under arrest for attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse." Tyler's face turned a sickly shade of white as he looked to me for answers. His mouth moved, but no words came out. "What do you mean?" he croaked, his voice cracking. "Dad, this is all a mistake. Please, you've got to believe me." I stood there, my hands clenched at my sides. My son was finally seeing the consequences of his choices, but the words I had been holding back for so long now felt like they were stuck in my throat. How could I tell him that I had already given up on him? How could I explain that he had betrayed everything I had given him? I took a step forward, my gaze fixed on him. "You don't understand, Tyler," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "This wasn't just a mistake. This was a choice, and you chose wrong." Tyler's face twisted with anger, but before he could respond, the officers moved in, cuffing him and guiding him toward the door. Emma, who had been standing in the corner, broke down, her hands clutching the edge of the table as she gasped for breath. "This is your fault," she shouted, her voice trembling. "You've ruined everything." I didn't say a word. I watched as they led Tyler and Vanessa out of the house, their faces full of desperation, their plans falling apart before their eyes. As the door slammed behind them, I finally let out the breath I had been holding. It was over. For better or worse, the truth had come to light. And now, I had to figure out what came next. But as I stood in the silence of my own home, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. My phone buzzed again, and when I glanced at the screen, my heart skipped a beat. It was an unknown number, and I just knew that this wasn't over yet. I picked up the phone. "Mr. Harris," the voice on the other end said, calm and deliberate. "There's something you need to know." And I knew in that moment that my journey wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The night had been long, and as I stood there, looking at the empty house, I realized the real work was only just beginning. The silence in the house was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. Tyler and Vanessa were gone, but the echo of their betrayal still lingered in every room, in every corner of this place that had once been filled with laughter and warmth. I stood in the foyer, staring at the door where they had been escorted out in handcuffs. The officers had left, their work done for the night, but the weight of what had just happened felt like it was pressing in on me from every direction. I felt empty, but not in the way I had expected. There was no sense of relief, no joy in seeing Tyler and Vanessa face the consequences of their actions. Instead, There was just a quiet, heavy stillness that surrounded me. It wasn't the victory I thought it would be. It was just the end of something I never wanted to face. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The walls, once a place of family memories, now felt like they were closing in around me. I reached the kitchen, the same room where I had spent countless evenings cooking for my family, where Evelyn used to stand beside me, her laughter filling the air as we shared quiet moments together. Now, the kitchen felt cold and sterile, like a place I had lost. The pot roast that Emma had made still sat on the table, untouched. The plate was a reminder of everything I had hoped this night would be. But now, it was just a sad symbol of how much I had been deceived. I couldn't sit down. Not yet. I needed to move, to think. I grabbed my coat from the chair and pulled it on, walking out the front door into the crisp night air. The cool breeze hit me like a slap, but it was exactly what I needed. I needed to feel something other than the weight of betrayal. I needed to feel alive again. As I stepped onto the driveway, I looked up at the stars, their light barely visible through the haze of city pollution. I hadn't taken the time to appreciate the night sky in years. It was a small thing, but it was a thing I could hold on to, something untouched by the lies and the hurt. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, seeing a text from Maria. "I hope you're okay, Mr. Harris. I've been thinking about you." I smiled to myself, a small flicker of warmth spreading through me. Maria had been the only one who had shown any real kindness tonight. She hadn't been part of the plan, hadn't been bought into the lies. She had seen the truth and had chosen to do the right thing, even when it wasn't easy. "Thank you, Maria. I couldn't have done this without you." I sent the message, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for her loyalty. She had risked everything to help me, to save me, and now she was the only person I truly trusted. As I stood there, my thoughts racing, I knew I had to make a decision. I had spent years sacrificing for my family, putting their needs above my own, hoping that one day it would all be worth it. But it wasn't. The truth was, I had been living in the shadow of my own sacrifice, and I couldn't do it anymore. I needed to rebuild. I needed to rebuild not just my business, but my life. I needed to reclaim my dignity, my sense of self-worth. I had spent so much time worrying about Tyler, about his future, about his mistakes. But what about my future? What about me? I had spent so long putting others first that I had forgotten how to put myself first. And now, I was finally ready to do that. I thought about the restaurants. I thought about what Evelyn would have wanted. She had always told me to treat employees like family, to care for them the way I had cared for my own. She had always believed that doing the right thing, even when it was hard, was the key to true success. I was ready to take that lesson to heart. I was ready to build something new, something that didn't rely on lies or manipulation. Something that was mine, something I could be proud of. I walked back into the house, my mind made up. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Tyler's betrayal define me. I was going to move forward, with or without him. I grabbed my phone again, searching for the number of the restaurant I had recently opened in Brooklyn. The one I had started just before the rift with Tyler had begun. It was small, but it had potential. And it was mine. I was going to make it a success, just as Evelyn had always dreamed. I dialed the number, and after a few rings, someone picked up. "Hi, it's Samuel Harris. I'm looking to speak with the manager. I have an offer for them." I paused, taking a deep breath. This was it. The beginning of something new. As I waited for the manager to come to the phone, I thought about everything that had led me here. The betrayal, the lies, the pain. But I also thought about the people who still believed in me, the ones who were still willing to stand by me, no matter what. When the manager answered, I wasted no time. "I need someone I can trust," I said, my voice steady. "Someone with integrity, someone who understands the value of hard work. I have a position for them at my restaurant. It's a chance to build something from the ground up. If they're interested, I'll be happy to give them the job." The manager was quiet for a moment, then responded with excitement and gratitude. We talked for a few minutes, and by the end of the call, I had hired someone I knew would be the right fit for my vision. I hung up the phone and smiled to myself. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing. I was no longer living in the past. I was moving forward, and I was going to build something meaningful. I thought about Maria again. I thought about the way she had stood by me, even when it wasn't easy. I had promised her a chance, and I was going to keep that promise. She was going to be part of this new chapter. As I sat down at the kitchen table, I finally felt a sense of peace settle over me. The house was still empty, but I didn't feel alone. I had my future in my hands. I had my chance to rebuild, to do things the right way. My phone buzzed once more, and this time it was a text from Maria. "I'll be there Monday morning, 10 a.m., at the Crown Heights location. I'm ready for this new beginning." I smiled, reading the message. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. This was just the beginning, but it was the beginning of something real, something I could be proud of. As I stood up from the table and looked around the house, I knew that the past would always be a part of me, but the future was mine to shape. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I finally felt ready to face whatever came next. But just as I reached for my jacket to head to bed, I heard a knock at the door. It was late, too late for a friendly visit. And when I opened it, I found someone I never expected. As I stood there, watching the last of the police cars disappear down the street, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and sadness. The chaos of the last few days had settled into a quiet stillness. But it was the kind of stillness that made you look inward, face the truth, and realize just how much you had been willing to overlook for the sake of others. My son, Tyler, the same boy I had raised, the one I had sacrificed everything for, had betrayed me, manipulated me, and nearly stripped me of everything I had built. But through all of that, I found something I had almost forgotten: my self-respect. Family. It's a word we all hold dear, but what does it really mean when the very people we love and protect turn against us? I had spent years trying to be the father Tyler needed, thinking that if I just worked harder, sacrificed more, maybe he'd come to appreciate me. But in the end, I realized that family isn't just about giving. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about knowing when to walk away, even if it's from your own flesh and blood. I've heard it said that you can't choose your family, but what they don't tell you is that you can choose how you let them treat you. I had allowed Tyler's greed, his arrogance, his manipulation to cloud my judgment for too long. I had allowed him to take advantage of my kindness, of the love I thought was unconditional. But in the end, it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my sense of self-worth. There's a painful truth that comes with standing up for yourself. It's not easy. It means facing the fact that the people you love may not love you the way you deserve. It means accepting that sometimes the ones you give everything to may be the very ones who tear you down. But it also means reclaiming your power. It means taking control of your life, setting boundaries, and not letting anyone walk over you, no matter how much you've sacrificed. What I've learned, through all the pain, through all the betrayal, is that self-respect isn't something you wait for others to give you. It's something you take, it's something you demand, And sometimes you have to fight for it, even if it means fighting your own family. As I looked around my home that night, I realized that this place, this life, was still mine to rebuild. I had the power to create something new, something rooted in honesty and integrity. The future was mine to shape, and no one, not Tyler, not anyone could take that away from me. I thought about Maria, the housekeeper who had risked everything to help me, and I knew I wasn't alone. I had people in my life who saw me for who I really was, who respected me. That was what mattered. The lesson I had learned, the lesson that would stay with me forever, was simple. True family is built on respect, not exploitation. And self-respect is the foundation of everything worth fighting for. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking you have to endure, that you have to give everything, that love is enough to make everything right. But love, without respect, is a prison. Respect is freedom. And when you finally find the strength to walk away from the lies, the manipulation, and the abuse, you find your freedom. You find yourself again. If you've ever felt like you've given everything to someone who didn't deserve it, know that you're not alone. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people you loved, know that you have the power to take back control. The journey is hard, but it's worth it. And it starts with setting boundaries, with honoring yourself, with knowing your worth. This story is not just mine. It's a story for anyone who has ever been taken for granted, for anyone who has ever been treated as less than. You deserve better. You deserve to be respected. And when you finally find the courage to stand up for yourself, to reclaim your life, you'll find that the world opens up in ways you never imagined. If you've connected with this story, if you've ever felt that call to stand up for yourself, leave a comment with the number 1 to show your support. And if you want to hear more stories of resilience, of redemption, and of reclaiming self-worth, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for listening, and remember, family is about respect, and that's something no one can take from you.